OK, Jackie, in the Express, J.K. Rowling, speaking of Campbell, is blasting Alistair Campbell, accusing him and Labour of indifference towards women. Can you help us understand this one?
What she was doing was she was defending, actually, Kemi Badenoch, who, of course, yesterday announced that a potential future Tory government would change the basis of the Equality Act, which, of course, was Labour's legislation in 2010, in order to bring more clarity about the definition of sex vis-a-vis gender, and particularly to provide certainty for areas where safe spaces are needed for women, for biological women, like refuges, like some sports competitions, like other areas where that's important. I've got quite a lot of sympathy with that. I'm not sure it needs a change in the law, but I've got quite a lot of sympathy. But what she was particularly calling out, though, was the way in which people criticised Kemi Badenoch was, for example, to call her a spiteful, toxic political personality. And she pointed out that how many times do we call men spiteful?
Was it Alistair who said that?
No, that wasn't Alistair.
I can't work out who said that.
So,
Ian Dunt, so he's a kind of a political commentator, yeah.
Yeah, and Alistair said she should have been focusing on her job as Business and Trade Secretary, and J.K. Rowling, actually rightly, I think, said, well, she's also the Women and Equalities Minister. Let's
have a look at at Kemi Badenoch actually talking about this policy.
It's important because a lot of women and children, in fact, are finding that they are feeling more and more vulnerable as single-sex spaces are disappearing, and even women in language disappearing. You often find, terms like birthing parent or chest feeding. And yes, it might not be the number one issue for a lot of people, but it is very serious for many of those people, like the woman I wrote about in my article, who talked about being raped in a toilet by a man wearing makeup. It's about helping to clarify what the law is.
OK, so there was a bit of to and fro with J.K. Rowling, I mentioned her criticism of Ian Dunt. She also responded to Kevin Maguire, who we see in the studio a lot, who tweeted, you see there, Kevin said, social care, economy, NHS borders, nap. Kemi Badenoch wants to whip up hatred against the trans minority. And J.K. Rowling says, never forget there's no clash between women's rights and trans demands. But defence of women's rights is inherently hateful and transphobic. So she's being sarcastic there. You never dig this hole, you never get out.
I think J.K. Rowling is one of the most brave women out there, and the fact that she's able to defend women and their rights as individuals. And I'd also like to sort of clarify some of this. I mean, as you said, this is what Kemi Badenoch is effectively trying to propose here is a clarification for the definition of sex. That in the Equalities Act, we're talking about biological sex and not what somebody chooses, i.e. how they identify
even
in their
had
gender.
A surgical procedure.
So the point is, Jeremy, we've got situations that have happened in this country, in Scotland, where somebody that was convicted of raping 2 women was then allowed into a women's prison.
Isla Bryson, which is the most famous case. It's not a great case to make law on.
No, it isn't. But Nicola Sturgeon, who was the first Minister of Scotland, defended it.
Yeah, I know.
And we're in the situation now where the legislation needs to reflect what those actual legal definitions should be looking like. And I think it's right that J.K. Rowling has defended it.
But I'm just thinking, so yesterday I spoke to a woman who was born male, who had full gender reassignment, who is indistinguishable to look at from a woman. She was in hospital. She was in a women's ward. Now, if they put her in a man's ward and she complained under the Equalities Act, the government's position is the Equalities Act can't help you because you may think you're a woman, you may have had gender reassignment, but under the Equalities Act, you're biologically male. And she just said that seems unfair.
But by fact, you're biologically male. You can't change can't change your sex.
And you agree with that?
I agree that your biological sex is determined at birth. Yes, I agree about that. Okay. But this is a really, as we know from the debate that's been having, this is a really difficult area of issues. Women's rights need to be defended, but trans people are often very vulnerable, and we need to find ways to protect their rights as well. But just to say one other thing about this, Jeremy, that the other point here is how we talk about each other during this election is really important. And the Electoral Commission today, alongside the Jo Cox Foundation that I chair, are publishing evidence from May's elections that shows the enormous amount of abuse that candidates face in elections. And women, by the way, face considerably more than men.
That's a very good
point.
So
let's fight this election in a way that defines our differences and where we have passionate disagreements, but where we treat people with
And we
respect.
still haven't got all the candidates named yet, so we're still right at the launch pad of this thing. So there's still time to put it on the right track. Thank you.